So when it's 2:03.
Oh, now we're recording, so I won't say anything. It's going to make chit chat, but now the chit chat will show up, including me describing now that the chit chat. Okay.
I don't think I've ever heard this group be this quiet.
Yeah.
Maybe everybody's just tired.
Mhm. Either that or as I said, I wasn't making any chit chat. So I could, in fact, put out chit chat, but I was a little worried about what I might say and then it would end up in the recording. So now we're going to actually have the recording and with a fair amount of me being concerned about making chit chat. Anyway.
Well, I think it's time to welcome everyone, and I'm sure other people will join us as the time goes. This is the League of Women Voters of Nashville Hot Topic. Been around for a long time, established on the first Friday of every month. We used to get together at several different places, sometimes having lunch, but right now that's not probably wise, and therefore we're still remaining on Zoom. The good thing about Zoom is that people from across the state can join us if they want to, and people who are normally not able to get in and fight the traffic of Nashville because of several reasons. They don't have to, they just can get on Zoom. So there are positives and negatives, and I just want to thank each of you for being here. And we are very busy. The League of Women Voters of Nashville voter will come out mid-month, and you'll see how busy we are, and we're always looking for volunteers. One such volunteer is the state of Tennessee. The League of Women Voters of Tennessee is working very hard on an initiative called Restoring Voter Rights, and they are looking for volunteers that would be willing to do phone interviews to counties across the state in the wintertime with a survey asking for how each county handles restoration of voter rights. If you are interested in that, you can email me. I'll put my email in the chat, and then I will put you in touch with the woman who is taking volunteers for this effort. This is one way we try to extend voter registration to all people, and this is an important initiative that the Tennessee League is taking on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen, and she will introduce our speaker. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. Today, we're going to be hearing from Jenn Harrman, who will speak to us about Metro Davidson County's long-term zero waste plan, as well as current concerns with regard to recycling, waste services, landfills, and other garbage concerns. Jenn Harrman has over 10 years of professional experience in public outreach and digital communications, as well as education and advocacy for the reuse of historic buildings. She has worked for both national and local preservation focused on nonprofits in addition to the metropolitan government of Nashville and Davidson County. Her current role is as the Zero Waste Program Manager for Metro Nashville, and she draws upon this expertise to revamp public outreach and education around Metro's recycling program in order to reduce contamination in recycling, as well as advance efforts to reduce waste in construction and demolition projects citywide. She serves as well as a staff expert to the Mayor's Sustainability Advisory Committee and sits on the Nashville Food Waste Initiative Steering Committee, as well as Urban Green Lab's Environmental Justice Steering Committee. I'm thinking she will find that she has seen a number of us many times because a number of those organizations, a number of us cycle through. So Jenn, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. And I really appreciate y'all inviting me to speak. I'm excited to hear that you're interested in this topic and to learn more about Nashville's waste issues and what we're trying to do to reduce the impact of those for our community. So I'm going to share my screen here, make sure. Are y'all seeing my PowerPoint now? Yes. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
All right. So let me get my notes in front of me here and we will get started. All right. So Nashville striving for zero waste. Today, I am first going to talk a little bit about how we got to Nashville's zero waste master plan, as well as why we've chosen to move towards a zero waste mindset. I'm going to talk a little bit about the programs and policies that we're currently working on that I'm involved with. And then I've got just a little bit at the end on how you all can help play a role in achieving zero waste for Nashville. So first off, we can't talk about moving to zero waste until we understand and talk about where we currently are with our waste and how we've historically been managing everything that Nashville throws away. So in Nashville, well over 80% of what we dispose of is sent to landfill. That's huge. Across all of Davidson County in 2020, we sent close to 1.5 million tons of material to landfill. And that includes both our municipal solid waste, which is really, that's just the regular garbage that you're throwing out in your trash at home or at work. There's landfills called municipal solid waste landfills, and that's where all that material goes. But then that 1.5 million also includes what's going to our construction and demolition landfills as well. So just construction and demolition material coming from those activities. And then you can see on the right, the amount that we are recycling or composting, and that's from residents, businesses, job sites, all combined. So all of those activities combined, it's just significantly less. And when we really start to look at those numbers at a national level and compare ourselves on how we're doing in terms of diverting material, our recycling and composting rates are about half the national average. So what that means is that Nashville heavily relies on landfilling to manage all of our waste. Now, if we look at just those municipal solid waste landfills that we're all contributing towards through our home residents, through businesses, so not including those construction and demolition landfills, about a quarter of our regular trash is all food and yard waste. So all this organic material. And then another quarter is paper and cardboard. About 16% or so are plastics. And then another 12% is yet another set of construction and demolition waste. So that tells us a couple of things. One, we have a huge issue with construction and demolition waste here in Nashville. Let's see, on the last slide, you saw that we sent 900,000 tons to the municipal solid waste landfills, but over 500,000 tons just to C&D landfills alone. So you can see that issue there. These are the top 4 categories of materials that we're throwing away. And the other thing you'll notice that is if you look at the top half, 50% essentially of our material can either be composted or recycled. So 50% of all that material that we're throwing away, at least that piece to municipal solid waste landfills can be managed in a different way. So those are kind of the 2 things related to our materials that we can divine. Now, Nashville's reliance on landfilling, it's certainly not new, clearly, but you can see from this chart that when we look back over the last 10 plus years, it's not just been a reliance. We've relied more and more and more heavily on landfilling, and the amount of material that we throw away has almost doubled in the last decade. And you'll also notice that our recycling efforts really haven't changed. They're pretty stagnant, and in fact, we're doing worse than we were in 2007. So you can see there's a lot of improvement that we can make. There's a lot of opportunity to divert material from landfills, a lot of improvements we can make. But the next question is, why do we want to change these trends? Why do we want to reduce our relying on landfill? What is the reason for that? Well, first off, currently landfilling is really cheap. It's why it's been our solution for so long, especially here in Middle Tennessee. It's just really cheap to landfill. But as we continue to send material to landfill and continue to rely on them, they do fill up. They are not infinite, holes where garbage disappears. It's not Mary Poppins bag or, that material has to go somewhere. And so they do run out of space. and that time is really coming sooner rather than later. Middle Point landfill is out in Murfreesboro, and about 48% of our waste goes there. So most of our, I mean, really a good majority of our waste is going out to Murfreesboro. And if we continue landfilling at our current rate, and they are not granted an expansion, which they are trying to get, but if they're not granted an expansion, that will close in the next decade. So then that means that for Nashville, if we want to continue landfilling, we have to truck that material farther and farther away. So that's going to increase costs to taxpayers, increase costs to the city, as well as, not to mention, the impact of having to just truck material farther and farther away. There's more carbon emissions associated with that, as well as just roadway impacts of just the weight of those trucks having to go across those roads farther and farther away. But cost is no longer, for us, the only driving factor that we're using to make decisions for Nashville. We are now taking an approach that considers both the environmental costs as well as the social costs, in addition to the financial costs for managing our waste. So environmentally, landfilling, it is regulated by the EPA to reduce its harmful impacts on our environment, but landfills still account for 15% of all methane emissions that are produced. And methane is a greenhouse gas that's 25 times more harmful than carbon dioxide. So the primary cause of that methane gas in our landfills is typically that food and yard waste. So a quarter of what we're sending to landfill is directly what's impacting and creating that, that methane gas. Additionally, landfills do have to be properly lined to prevent harmful toxins and pollutants from contaminating our groundwater and our soil as well. I like to call it trash juice. Like, if you can imagine your trash bag and the juice that gets in there, imagine a landfill and tons and you know, that hundreds of thousands of tons of material creating juice that is all toxic and polluted, and having to manage that. So that all has to be managed, it has to be monitored, and ultimately this is just not an environmentally sustainable way to continue to manage our waste. And lastly, we also have to look at those social impacts of landfilling, or rather what I like to talk about, the people impacts. How are we impacting people? How do landfills impact people? You, me, our friends, our family, neighbors, everyone that lives in our communities. If any of you know anyone that lives in Murfreesboro, near this landfill, or live in Bordeaux near the construction and demolition landfill that's still open, landfills are not isolated from people. They're in our backyards. They may not be in your backyard, but they are in someone's backyard. And most significantly, what that means is the impact to our human health. There is the potential adverse impact of health from landfills due to that landfill gas, especially, and heaven forbid if that groundwater, if those liners were to be impacted and we were to contaminate groundwater, groundwater or our soils. So there's those health impacts, but then also there's just the quality of life impacts. You know, landfills, trash does not smell great. They do a lot to reduce that smell from getting out of the landfill area, but talk to anyone that lives in those communities and they'll tell you they've smelled the odor coming off the landfill. So odor, the noise of trucks going in and out to and from the landfill, those trucks also impact traffic. They also mean that you have to maintain and upkeep those roads. That's construction impacts. So there's just a lot of quality of life impacts that go along with landfilling as well that we have to consider. So you've got the economic, the environmental, and those social impacts of solid waste management. And these are the things, all three of these together are what we evaluated when looking at a zero waste master plan, to consider more than just that financial piece that has always been the focus of how we managed our waste in the past. And when we did that, it really showed that we should be transitioning from a reliance on disposal and landfill to managing in our waste rather as valuable resources. So by doing that, it creates more benefits to our community than our current system does. It creates jobs, it conserves energy and resources, it reduces pollution. There are just far more benefits when we change to this new mindset. So what that means, we're going from a mindset of seeing everything as waste, everything just going to landfill and needing to figure out how to manage that disposal, to seeing waste really as resources that still have value and use both in our community and in our economy as well. So by managing our waste as resources, we are essentially following the principles of EPA's waste hierarchy that you see here, that reduce, reuse, recycle, to identify how we as both a community and as a municipal government can help prevent waste from, first of all, being created in the first place. If we don't create it, we don't have to figure out what to do with it. But then what we do create, how can we reduce what waste we actually do need from the materials that we do need? And then how can we reuse and repair more materials, whether that's for similar uses or for new uses, and then looking to recycling and composting as much of the material that's then left over before we ever consider landfilling. Now, changing this mindset does not come without its many challenges, especially here in Nashville and in Middle Tennessee. So first off, top challenge is that only 20% currently of solid waste management services are managed under Metro. So we touch very little. And that means that the majority of solid waste management is done by private services, which in no way do we have any interest in eliminating, but it does mean that that's kind of a black box for us, as Metro has really limited knowledge for the large majority of the waste stream because it's all private services. So it does limit our ability to have a more comprehensive solid waste management program across the entire county. So that's something we've got to work through and think through. Second, there's insufficient funding, as you can imagine, with many things. Right now, Metro's waste services are funded through the city's general fund. So that means that we're competing with funding for schools, for fire, for police, and all the other critical services that Metro funds from that pot of money. So, you know, as you can imagine, there are certain things that just come before picking up your trash and picking up your recycling. There's a lot of really important services that the city provides. And when we have to compete with that money, then that means that we don't have enough staff to conduct a lot of effective education. I'm pretty much it when it comes to recycling and waste reduction education. I've got a little bit of help on the construction and demolition side, but it's a very small team of people. But more so, it's the inability to have staff for compliance. Right now, we have bans on cardboard. So cardboard's not allowed by Metro Code to go into any trash container, same with yard waste and same with electronics. But we have no way to enforce that because we need to have staff to be able to enforce that. So being able to enforce those existing bans would be huge. And we need to figure out how we can have a different funding system to be able to do that, or we're not competing with police and fire and schools and those kinds of things. Next, recycling is voluntary. Voluntary programs, they're proven to just have limited effectiveness. There is a lack of commitment that's really perceived by the community in a voluntary program that just translates to less participation. We have about 140,000 households that are eligible for recycling right now, but for our curbside program at least, but only about 30,000 households, or I'm sorry, we have 30,000 or so households that are not participating. So that's a big chunk, and keep in mind that's just for our curbside program, which is more the urban core of Nashville and Davidson County. So not only are people not all participating in the program, we also have folks that are not necessarily caring whether or not what they put in that bin is actually recyclable. In 2020, our contamination rate, so the amount of material that was not recyclable being put in recycling containers, was 46%, almost half. So people just, maybe it's recyclable, maybe it's not, I'm going to throw it in here anyway. There's no consequence for, wish cycling, if you will. We have been able to reduce that in the past year down to 28%, which has been a huge win for us. It reduced our costs. It makes the program more efficient, makes more material get recycled that way, actually. But, that voluntary program really can lead to some of those issues as well. And then lastly, there's just limited options to landfilling, especially when it comes to food waste and when it comes to construction and demolition waste. We do have a wonderful composting facility, commercial composting facility out in Ashland City, a compost company. So there's a good bit of material. They've done a great job in getting us started and being able to divert some of those food scraps and other organic material that can be composted, but they alone cannot take on the entire city. There's a lot of more infrastructure, more technology, and more programs that are needed to be able to divert that material, especially if we, which we do, want to eventually have a curbside food scrap collection program. We need somewhere for that material to be processed. And right now there's just not that availability. And same with construction and demolition material. It's really easy to landfill that material. There are a few options for some construction and demolition recycling, but it's pretty minimal. And it takes a lot of extra work to recycle construction and demolition material. You have to be dedicated to do it and want to pay more. So cost is also an issue there in having those facilities. So there's just really not the options to even if there's nowhere to send the material other than the landfill, then, you know, there's that infrastructure issue there and as well that we're competing with. All right, so with all of that in mind, all of those challenges, but also understanding the benefits of moving to a different perspective and a different way of managing our solid waste. The Nashville Solid Waste Region Board did develop Nashville's first ever zero waste master plan to guide the city in all of our solid waste management decisions. And it was approved this past year by Metro Council. So it is, you know, it's approved by the Metro Council, it's approved by the mayor's office. It is what we are working towards. So this plan is a zero waste master plan, and it has these goals and priorities. So first off, the top goal is to reach zero waste. That doesn't mean 100%, but we are looking at a goal of diverting up to 90% of all of our waste from landfills through all those strategies that we talked about. Trying to keep pretty much the majority of our material that could be managed in a different way, and not going to those landfills. So that includes, a big part of that is increasing recycling. A quarter, 26% of our waste material is all cardboard and paper. That has a home. There are paper mills all over Tennessee. They're in the Southeast, so there's options for that. So increasing recycling, capturing that material, as well as making sure people recycle right. Food waste reduction and recovery programs as well. Food waste is an issue that goes beyond just solid waste management. It goes into, you know, the fact that there's a lot of people here in Nashville that go hungry, that there are people that are food insecure and can use some of this good food that goes to waste. So making sure that we're doing our part to help increase some of those recovery programs to recover good food and get it into our community in need and be able to share it in that way. First and foremost, food should be eaten, not wasted. So starting there, and then for all those food scraps that maybe there isn't anything that you can do with, increasing composting programs and accessibility to composting programs as well is a big part of this plan. Then, of course, all on its own, that construction and demolition stream is a huge priority, finding recovery options, finding recycling options for all those materials. And then lastly, strengthening public education. It's important that not only we have this mindset, but we help other folks understand how they can participate in refusing, reducing, reusing, recycling, and composting to help all of us as a community to manage our waste more sustainably, and help folks understand where we're coming from, what we're trying to do, and how they can support and help in that movement and in those goals. So in terms of our zero waste master plan, we have about 30 or so different strategies that are identified to help us get to this goal of 90% zero waste. But just about 4 of them can help us increase our diversion by 47%. So these are where we see our highest impact areas of what we're trying to go towards. So one of that first thing is mandating recycling and enforcing bans. So no more recycling is voluntary. You're required to do it, and we have the enforcement to support that. So that's one of the strategies recommended. Requiring that construction and demolition debris get diverted is huge. That alone is a really big chunk. I think it's 18% increased diversion just from construction and demolition materials. So if our current diversion is 18% and we just require construction and demolition recycling, we can essentially double our diversion rate that we currently have. Then the next one, implement an incentivized fee structure for curbside collection. So what that really means is first just having people pay for their trash like many other cities do. It is a utility, and have people pay based on their usage of it. You know, I personally only put my trash can out probably once every 3 weeks because I compost at home. I'm able to recycle most materials. And so other folks that are maybe using a lot more trash and throwing out a lot more trash that maybe is more of a cost impact on the solid waste management system, those folks should be paying for that service, and everybody should be. The idea is that we would pay as a utility rather than coming out of those general services funds the general fund from the city. And then incentivizing recycling and food waste collection by you pay for your trash, the more you recycle, the more you throw in your food waste container, the less you would ultimately pay. And also going to a fee system would mean that we would have the ability to have curbside food scrap collection, which probably won't happen under the general fund. And then the last one is collection efficiency. So right now, again, we only touch 20%. And so that private sector, especially for private residential collection, residential and commercial collection out there, right now it's kind of a free-for-all. So you might have 4 different companies, collection companies coming down the same street different days of the week to collect trash, because maybe the gas station uses this company, and then the company next door, the McDonald's, uses a different company, and then so on and so forth. And then the people that live down the street all use different companies. So wouldn't it make more sense if they all just use one company? It's one truck, they all pick up really efficiently. It's not how it works right now. So if we can do some things to support more of those efficiencies, that can help increase diversion as well, because it'll also provide more access to recycling program. I don't know if anybody here lives in the general services district that doesn't get our curbside collection, but even though recycling, all haulers are required to provide recycling services, they don't always do it. And so it can be difficult right now for folks to get curbside collection if they're not in the Metro program. All right, so that is how we got to our zero waste master plan, what our goals are, and what we're looking to do. So now what are we actually working on is the next step. Again, this was approved by Metro Council just last year, or in this past year, approved by the Solid Waste Region Board in 2019. So in that time, I don't know how many of you have seen us announce every other week recycling. We did announce it right before COVID happened, and when Metro Nashville was going into, unfortunately, a bit of a financial crisis. So this got put off. It was really frustrating for folks that have been working on trying to get increased recycling collection, but we are really excited that the mayor has recommitted to every other week recycling. We've already hired staff. We've already started training staff. We have everything we need. We're just kind of getting those last final logistics and pieces in place. So I'm really excited that we are going to be increasing that frequency of recycling to every other week starting next year. We don't have an official date yet, so I can't announce that, but I can tell you it's going to be early in 2022 that we do move to every other week recycling. So that does mean, one, when you're able to access that program more, you're going to treat it with, you're able to increase the amount of material that you're recycling as opposed to throwing away. Right now, say you only have one recycling cart, you didn't realize you could get another recycling cart. So your recycling cart fills up, well, there's no room, but trash is getting picked up. So I'm going to toss that material just in the trash can. Well, now with the increased collection, there's going to be less potential for that kind of activity and that kind of habit to happen. But it's also an opportunity to increase the participation as well to those 30,000 customers that currently aren't using recycling. Recycling will be easier. It won't be once a month. It'll happen more regularly. We'll get these things picked up for you. So hopefully we can also get some of those folks back into the program. So that's big for us. It sounds like such a little thing, but it's huge for us, and we're excited to be able to provide that additional service to the community. Public education has been a big part of my role. I've only been with the solid waste team for about just barely under a year, or under 2 years. So I've been with Metro government for 5 years, but with solid waste for just about 2. So in that time, a big part of my focus really has been this public education piece, because recycling contamination has been so bad. So we rolled out some Recycle Right program materials, webinars, and workshops that right now we offer, I think, every other month, but we can also provide that to groups, just a recycling focused presentation to talk about why we've changed a little bit about our accepted materials. For example, we only accept plastic bottles, plastic jars, and plastic jugs. Because all other plastics are not getting recycled right now. Until they are, I'm not going to tell you to put it in the bin, because it's just ending up in landfill either way. So we've changed some materials based on the transparencies that have come around with recycling, processing, and collection. So we've been able to do that. We've provided new signage at our drop-off signs, new materials in 4 different languages as well. Have been excited to do all of that. And then additionally have added our Nashville Waste and Recycling app. No matter if you're a curbside customer, or if you're just a Davidson County resident, or even somebody that works in Davidson County, we have the Nashville Waste and Recycling app that'll tell you how to manage any of your waste properly. So not just how to recycle right, whether or not something can be recycled, but If it's something else, something kind of a weirder item, you know, like a lawnmower. My lawnmower doesn't work. I can't fix it. I don't know what to do with it. Well, you can take it to one of our convenience centers and we will recycle it in the scrap metal. So helping people understand that there's programs beyond that traditional recycling, and also making sure that materials, especially like electronics, don't end up in landfill, since electronics can be very toxic and hazardous. We have a program to recycle and refurbish those materials rather than send them to landfill. So this National Waste and Recycling app provides all of that kind of information. You can search by material. You can use it online at recycle.nashville.gov. You can also use it just by downloading the app on your mobile device. It also has all of our drop-off site information. It's got, if you're curious what your collection route is, if you are a curbside customer, we have that on there. But then we've also got reminders and collection day information as well. So if you are a curbside customer and you want to be the first to know when we're going to every other week, that will be updated on that app as soon as that rolls out, and you'll get reminders of those collection days when they come up. So it's really handy. We're really excited to be able to do that. And we've been able to do that with funding from the Nobody Trashes Tennessee campaign as well. So that has been super fantastic. Additionally, we've got more materials just on zero waste, so people understand what is zero waste. At zerowaste.nashville.gov, we've got an AmeriCorps member that's been helping us with those materials. We've also created some industry-specific guides, especially for the construction demolition industry, to help them understand what resources are actually out there and start providing some of that education. We're also working on an event recycling guide as well for large events. I realize I've been talking for a long time, so I'm going to try and wrap up a little quickly so you can get to any questions. We are focusing again on food waste. Curbside collection is a little farther away, but there are still opportunities through our compost drop-off program at all of our convenience centers. We also do a lot of backyard composting education and sell compost bins at a lower rate of $50 for one of these earth machines. We provide them for free for community composting groups and have worked. This one is actually a site that we worked with Councilmember Berkeley Allen on, and one of our beautification commissioners have put this community composting site together. But then we're also looking at, once you make compost, it's got to go somewhere. So Metro really needs to lead by example as taking on that material and creating a market for it. So we've been working with and supporting the Nashville Food Waste Initiative and their work to create a policy around compost use for Metro government. So I'm hoping to see more of that come here in 2022, if not earlier as well. Construction demolition, I could do a whole presentation on this, but I won't. I will keep it very short. Just very briefly, in July of this past year, we started officially requiring, well, let me scroll back. 2006, we started requiring that people tell us what they do with their waste before they get a building permit. We just never had a way to enforce it. It was a checkbox. So now we're actually asking for that plan and have a way in the permitting process to make sure that people are telling us how much waste they're generating and what they're doing with it. You're not required to recycle, just tell us what you're doing with your waste. However, it has spurred people to look at recycling options because they're very nervous that they're not going to get their use and occupancy or not get through the permitting process, which is kind of great because that's what we want to do, is encourage more of these activities. But it is an ability for us to insert ourselves in the permitting process. So in the future, if there were to be a mandate, we've already got ourselves set up to start and be able to enforce that program. This is also something that is complete 100% cost recovery through the permitting process by the developers that are building these projects. So it's a really nice system that we've been able to put together to not only capture that data, but also start educating the industry. It's also created a lot of interest. There's been a lot of focus from the mayor's office and the Mayor's Sustainability Advisory Committee about construction demolition and what we can do, because it is Nashville. You can't walk anywhere without running into a crane. And so there is definitely some interest both internally with Metro to create some policy, as well as to create some external policy. So excited that there's been some support for exploring that as an option. Lastly, I just have 2 more quick slides left. Things that you can do. So you want to be more zero waste, contribute to some of this. It doesn't have to be big things. It's something as little as recycling right can really help. But these are just some ideas and thoughts on how you can at home think about how you can be less wasteful, essentially. So first off, rethinking your relationship with waste is a big one. think of it not as waste, think of it as a resource. You know, these are materials that require somebody to cut down a tree or to drill oil out of the ground or to pull stuff from our earth to create these things. For all of that to just go in a landfill where it just sits and it creates more harmful environmental impacts. So thinking, how can we prevent waste? How can we maybe in our purchases do things, purchase things in a less wasteful manner? Looking for recycled packaging or recycled content in packaging or packaging that you can recycle, or can you skip the packaging altogether and bring your own bag, that kind of thing. Reduce and reuse, look at repairing things. We're a throwaway culture, so but there's a lot of things that you can repair. YouTube is really great for it. You know, I've repaired a Mac computer, I've done, which seems almost impossible, you can do it. So looking for those opportunities. Of course, avoiding single-use plastics and any kind of single-use items. Looking at preventing food waste, we're getting to the holiday season. So meal planning, making sure you know how to store those materials or find ways to reuse all of those leftovers. We're going to be hosting a webinar later in December that will talk about just how much food is wasted during the holiday season. And it's a lot. How much turkey is wasted during Thanksgiving is kind of outrageous. So just thinking about those things, looking at opportunities to compost, and then recycling right. I will provide a link to our webinar if you're interested. I encourage you to download the app. And then if you want to take it one step further, get your workplace involved, starting a green team, encouraging people to, you know, some of the simplest things like your printer at work might be defaulted to print single-sided. If you default it to print double-sided, you're going to save so much paper. There's a lot of little things that you can do in the workplace. And we've got some resources for that on or developing some resources for that on our website. As you all know, probably more than a lot of other people, to talk to your elected officials, make it known that you care about these issues and that you support zero waste initiatives, sustainable initiatives for your community. And then lastly, check out our zero waste master plan, check out all of our resources, know what we're up to, what we're trying to do, and get any other tips and tricks that you want to know about zero waste at our website, zerowaste.nashville.gov. I think I went a little bit longer than you wanted. I apologize, but that is all I have if y'all have any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. You did wonderfully. I will tell you that there were a few people who are a little older who were wondering if you could slow down your talk, but I figured, you know, you were trying to get it in, so you did get it in.
Sorry, y'all.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm totally, you know, the difference, it's a few decades. It's a decade difference. It's okay. But there are plenty of questions. So I will start from the top. So some of them have to do, the first two have to do with demolition and construction and demolition. Two things. One is, I think you may have answered some of this, which is that you're getting yourself into the process of permitting, even if you don't have an enforcement. But the question is about monitoring and detecting anything that gets thrown into those dumpsters. So in particular, things that are not to be in there, you know, toxic things. And then possibly also the question about how to encourage recycling, which I think you can go a little bit further. You said you would be able to have an entire conversation. So those were the first two questions.
That's a really good question. So the first one in terms of monitoring those dumpsters. So toxic type things, that's actually something that often is more caught at the transfer station or at the actual landfills. They do have ways of detecting toxic or radioactive material. They're always checking for that type of material because landfills, certain material, for example, a construction and demolition landfill is only rated for construction and demolition material. So if they get, if one of their sensors goes off for the material that they're looking to detect, they can reject that, and then they have to go and sort through all that material and handle it that way. So the toxic piece is something that to a certain extent is monitored by the landfills and the those haulers and folks. In terms of just recycling and checking on, you know, those bins, when we get to the point of, like, for example, enforcement of cardboard or enforcement of any material, if we were to say require that all scrap metal be recycled, which is actually one of the easiest things to recycle, and you can get paid for it. You do get paid for it. PSC Metals takes pretty much a ton of the scrap metal that's coming off of construction and demolition sites, because you can get paid for it. So it offsets your costs as well. But that material, if we were to require that, then we would have to have inspectors that would go out and check those bins and monitor and see if that material is being put in the right place. And then from that, those enforcement agents would be able to write fines for any of those issues that were to come up. So it's really more about staffing to check for it, for any kind of that kind of separation. But right now we're not currently, because since we don't require any of it, there's none of our staff or anyone that's going out and checking on these dumpsters currently. It's really more handled by those private landfill folks, or anybody that they might be taking material to is going to be checking for that. And then the other piece, how to encourage more. That's one thing that we've struggled with, because typically recycling costs more. If you want to have all of your recyclable material, for example, on a construction site mixed into one bin, there's only one place you can take that. For someone that will be willing to sort construction and demolition recyclable material and then process it. And they really don't, it's basically dumped out onto a concrete pad and they pick it out. So it's a high cost and not really regularly taken advantage of. And it's also directly at the landfill. So there's some, you know, it's just, it is what it is. That's the only place that it's at right now. There's one place out of county that will take some of that stuff, but again, you're looking at those higher costs. So one thing we're trying to do is how can we connect the dots for people to create a system where they can recycle material while also not making it financially an impact on their project. Because I know on most projects, they're trying to really reduce costs as much as possible.
Yeah.
But like I said, we're focusing on materials like the metal and letting people know, hey, if you separate that out and take it over here, you're going to get paid for that material. So things like that, and trying to find those stories that we can tell, and building some case studies around some of those stories to give people those positive impacts and benefits to the project, to encourage them through that.
So some of the other questions are about the rules around what is recyclable and what isn't. And I think you mentioned that what happens is the market is really what's constraining what can and cannot be put into it. I just wonder, like certain things which we know for sure are always recyclable, like cardboard. Is there any idea to have a separate pickup for such things? So that I just spent some time in New York, and everyone has a box of cardboard at their, you know, it's just cardboard, right? You know, and it's a lot. Let me tell you, everyone's got a lot of cardboard right now, and particularly in New York. But they come by separately just to pick up the cardboard. And I'm just wondering, are there ideas about any of those instead of single stream possibly moving to that kind of thing, or not?
There has not been at this time any discussion about separating our recycling. We actually did separate our recycling originally, and it wasn't until like plastics came around that we started and moved to a single stream system. It used to be that you would separate it, put it at the curb, and then the trucks actually had separate bins for the different material. But there's a lot of logistical issues, and then also concern for participation. When you're asking more, you know, there's kind of these two modes of thinking. I'm going to separate everything. I do everything that I can at home, but I know I'm not everyone. I know that I'm the type of person that will do that, and that there are folks that won't. So single stream is an opportunity to capture, you know, people that are not going to go to that effort. But then you're also looking at if you go to a dual stream system, so where you are separating some material out, that requires extra trucks, it requires extra staff. So it's finding the right balance of that. So right now, because we've already got the single stream system in place, we aren't necessarily looking at that at this time, but trying to encourage people to do better and recycle right. And really the biggest issues that we have with the recycling program is more around plastics than anything else. Plastic, and then of course just people treating it like a trash can. You find a whole slice of pizza in the pizza box that, you know, the pizza box itself isn't the worst thing, although if it's dirty, it should be composted, not recycled. But when you can have a whole slice of pizza in there, then it becomes a trash can. It's just really not the way that it should be managed.
So someone has also asked about glass and in particular, possibly creating a more local market for
Mhm.
glass into things like asphalt or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've done a study on how we can incorporate glass into our sidewalks. So it was a successful study. And right now, currently, the glass that we collect in our contract, super fun fact, we have not been able to remove glass from our current contract. So any of the glass that we collect is the property of our contractor. So until that contract ends and we can change it, there's a lot of fun things we're going to do when this contract comes up to see how we can improve. So when that happens, there's an opportunity for us to look at just Metro, how we can incorporate glass into sidewalks. I will add that there's been some studies. There's some studies that have been done for roadways, and they have found that glass is just not as ideal for roadway infrastructure as it would be for something like a sidewalk that doesn't have really heavy machinery and trucks going on it. So there's opportunity for that. I'll also add glass is one thing that we would be looking at as a separate, like a separate truck, separate collection program. I should have said that.
Somebody did ask about where you can take these, the community composting and the glass sites are. And I think if you go to Google Maps or to your app, you'll be able to find that. I don't remember how many there are, but every county in Tennessee has a place to take recycling of various sorts.
Yeah, the glass, and I'm pulling it up right now, glass can be taken to any of our recycling drop-off sites. And then any, as well as our convenience centers. So we have 10 recycling drop-off sites and 4 convenience centers. So I'm putting in the link to all of our drop-off sites. These are also available in our app. You can find those there as well. And then our convenience centers also are where you can take all of your compostable material if you would like to do our compost drop-off. So I'll send a link just specifically to the compost drop-off program. So that is a service that needs to be staffed. So it's only at those 4 locations. In terms of community composting, yes. I know the only one that I know of that currently is taking food scraps from the community is the one in Green Hills. It's at Trinity Presbyterian. So that's the one that that I showed the picture of earlier. I don't know if there's any other sites yet that are accepting food scraps from the community. They're currently being used more as educational sites to teach people about how to compost.
At Second Presbyterian, we are also accepting compost food waste.
Ooh, that's excellent.
But only food waste.
Yeah, typically it's not so much all that brush and all of that stuff. We have brush collection that comes through the entire county once a quarter. So that's, but yeah, you wouldn't necessarily want that in a community compost site.
I believe we have another question about finding things other than radioactive in demo waste, things like asbestos and that sort of thing. Is that also something that they're very good at doing at the C&D landfill?
So the C&D landfill is rated for that material. So that is something that's just managed by that whole process. They know that it's going to be in there. In terms of the recycling programs that are out there, I know that that's something, it's what makes drywall really difficult to recycle. Any kind of demoed drywall, new cuts of drywall recycling. There's programs out there that the state's been working on piloting how you could compost that material. There's just options for that. But for that demo drywall and the asbestos, it's just a really difficult material to manage. But it is managed at the landfill in terms of those substances.
Does anybody else have any questions out there that they'd like to ask?
Hi, this is Stuart Clifton, and I had a comment or two. This is a great presentation. I mean, there's so much more you could say, but we didn't have time to do it all. But I guess one thing I wanted to mention is that the plastics, there were some questions about plastics because we have changed on that. Yeah. The problem there is the plastics industry overall wants you to think everything's recyclable, and it's just not. There's not a market for some of it. It doesn't work. So that's why all of a sudden these numbers don't mean what they used to mean, because they were never particularly true. And so that's why the department has been so clear about bottles and about what containers we can take, what we can't. So it is a change, but it's a change for the right reasons, because it just hasn't been working the other way. And somebody mentioned about glass, why can't we do that through the curbside stream? And I mean, it just contaminates the rest of it, I think, is the answer there. We used to do that, but when it breaks, it just gets crazy. And so there's not a commercial for the city, but there are reasons for some of these changes. And the broad statewide advocacy community is really working on doing a whole lot more with plastics. And there's some bipartisan support for that, especially focused on single-use plastics and what we can do about that. I just wanted to throw that in there.
I appreciate that, because I know California just passed the first legislation to ban those recycling symbols, because they just tell you what the plastic's made from, not that it can be recycled. It's all a marketing scheme. Don't ever look at them. They are useful to a certain extent, but they're really not helpful for you all as recyclers. And you're absolutely right. We found out that bottles, jars, and jugs are the only things that are currently being recycled. I have hope for clamshell containers and for plastic tubs like butter tubs, but I'm not going to tell you to put those in the bin right now, because they're still going to landfill. They're not sorting them out. They're not selling them. So I appreciate that. I will make a note to include that in this presentation, to just add some more in there.
We have another question that's come in, and it's about if someone does get one of those black compost bins, do they have to use all the compost in their own yards, or is there something they can do with the compost?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, honestly, it's a soil amendment. So you could just throw it in your yard and it's going to be just fine. Unless you're really generating a ton of food waste, if you have a really, really big family and, have a lot of family gatherings and things and just have a huge amount, it actually doesn't produce all that much as you might think. So it's really easy to incorporate into your yard, but at the same time, put that on Facebook or on Craigslist, or, tell any group, your church group, there is somebody that will take your compost 100%, probably your neighbor or somebody very close by. So folks really like using compost, and people will be willing to take it, I am sure. This is a good question. I just saw it pop up.
I was wondering if you were going to go into that.
So that was, we did have a honky tonk glass recycling pilot program that Mayor Berry launched. That unfortunately, it was an exciting thing to launch, but there were a lot of fundamental flaws in the program that allowed it to fail spectacularly. Unfortunately, downtown is really difficult. It's also one of the weird places that we pick up, because we really pretty much only do residential. It's one of those things that has just been grandfathered into the system. And the issue really is just the sheer amount of waste that's being generated downtown from those businesses is so much that we are picking up 24/7. It's just constant trucks going through there. And with the glass recycling program, again, it comes down to the enforcement issues and we couldn't not pick up. So if somebody contaminated the glass, which it was highly contaminated because folks weren't educating their staff, and the staff has a high turnover. So people weren't doing the right thing to put it in the right bin. And because of the health impacts of that, of not picking up all of that trash downtown, it wasn't feasible. We couldn't not pick it up just because of the sheer amount. So we were just basically sending out a separate truck that was having to not pick up any material because it was all contaminated, and then still having the regular trash trucks, sending more trash trucks to go back out to pick all of it up. So unfortunately, there were just some systems in place that didn't work. I have not heard any talk about trying to bring that program back at this time. I think maybe it's still a little too sensitive for some people. I'm not sure. Wasn't that long ago, but it's a huge issue. Downtown itself alone is just, the amount of waste they generate is out of control. And I know that one of my colleagues was talking to some of the bar owners down there and trying to encourage them to go to draft rather than all of those beer bottles, just have reusable. And, everybody, many beer drinkers prefer beer in a draft glass than they do in a bottle anyway. So, but the people downtown said, well, I can sell 2 to 3 times more bottles of beer in the same amount of time that I can sell a draft. And so because of their bottom line, they're sticking with the bottles because they can just pop those tops, and it's just a lot faster for them. So it's a tough cookie to crumble, tough nut to crack, but hopefully we can get back around to looking at it some more.
I have a question about when yard waste, or not yard waste, but the once every N months when stuff is picked up, where does that go?
It gets mulched. We have a contractor, Living Earth, that takes all that material and mulches it all up. So it is one of the diversion programs that we do have. So
And
yeah.
yes, so it's used. It's a private contractor who picks that up.
It is. We used to have a composting, or not a composting, but we did have our own mulching program, but it was sold off, and then we went to a private contractor for that. So
okay.
Yeah.
And there, I guess there was. I'm trying to think if there was another question that I have here. Other than it was a great presentation, which I'm hearing over and over again. Oh, I know. I had one other question. I'm really sorry about this. You had mentioned that possibly in 2022 we'll go to twice a month recycling. You also mentioned the possibility of paying for the service, and also my assumption is, given where else I have lived that we could have smaller bins, for example. Like you, I don't put my bin out. I put my bin out maybe once a month, and I never generate enough trash. And I used to have a little itty bitty bin that I would pay less for, and it felt really good. And now I have this humongous bin, and it's like I put it out once every 4 weeks. So I'm wondering, you had mentioned that possibly that service is coming about. Will that also come about at the same time, or is that further down the line?
Oh, it's much further down the line. It's something that we have to do a whole cost of service study. We have to better understand our whole system to be able to even think about moving to a fee structure. And additionally, that is increasing services is an easy win for everybody. Asking them to pay for their trash is going to be a challenge. So we need to do that in a way that just is got a lot of planning behind it, a lot of discussion behind it, a lot of community input behind it. So it's not something that's happening right now, but it is one of the reasons why solid waste was moved to Metro Water Services just in this past fiscal year. So there's no longer Public Works, it's the National Department of Transportation, and now solid waste is with the utility. We are not funded through any of the water fees, any of your water rates, not coming to us. We're still general fund, but this does provide an opportunity to learn from what they're doing and how they've set up a funding system. So that is a step, I guess, if you could say, we've taken towards a fee system, but it's going to be a while. Stormwater, when they came over, it took over 7 years, I think, before they ever had a fee system. And we haven't even started looking at that right now. So we just want to get you more services, and then we'll go from there.
Okie doke. I wanted to fly before I ran, or whatever. Or run
if it were
before
up to me, I would be doing it all at once.
I'm just looking forward to it. That's all. I'm just saying, it's like, I want my little itty bitty thing back. Anyway,
I love that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. It was really great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I just want to throw one last thing. I'm putting in a link to, I totally forgot. We are hosting a Story of Plastic panel discussion that you will be able to watch the Story of Plastic screening. Well, you can actually watch it for free right now on the Discovery Channel. It is a documentary that we're also going to get some experts to then talk specifically about plastic recycling. So if you want to jump in on that, it's going to be really great. We've got Dr. Pageant from TSU, who is huge in environmental justice here. My colleague, who's been in solid waste for 20 years. We've got Urban Green Lab involved as well. So I just wanted to share that, throw that link in there if you want to learn everything you never wanted and still did want to know about plastic.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you again very much. And thank you, everybody, for being at this whatever hot topic that it is. And the next hot topic will be a speaker from Thistle Farms, who will be discussing the program at Magdalen and Thistle Farms. And that will be the first Friday in December, which is, some number, like before 8. So I don't remember what the number is, but it's the first Friday, and y'all will, I'm sure we'll get, I always forget names, I forget dates, but I know it's the first Friday, so hope to see you all there. Thanks again, Jen. Who finishes recording? There.